I have a confession. I used to spend an embarrassing amount of money on dishwashing liquid. Every time I went to the store, I would pick up a bottle of the leading brand, toss it in my cart, and not think twice. I never looked at the price, I never read the ingredients, and I never questioned whether there was a better way. But one day, I looked at the receipt and realized I was spending nearly $40 a year on dish soap alone. That didn't seem like much, but over a decade, that's $400, and I was paying for nothing more than water, surfactants, and fragrance. I had heard about a homemade dishwashing liquid recipe that used just 3 ingredients: castile soap, washing soda, and essential oils. The concept was simple. Castile soap is a natural plant-based soap that cuts grease. Washing soda boosts the cleaning power, and essential oils add a pleasant scent. It took me 5 minutes to make a batch. The total cost was about $2 per batch, which lasted me 3 months. Compared to the store-bought bottles at $6 each, I was saving $12 over a 6-month period. I decided to test it against the leading commercial brand. I ran a side-by-side grease test, measured foaming, and checked the final rinse clarity. The results were surprising. The homemade version cut through grease just as well, foamed enough to clean, and rinsed clean without leaving a film. The commercial brand had a slight edge in foaming, but the homemade version was perfectly adequate for daily use. I also tested it on burnt pots, and it worked beautifully after a short soak. The best part? I knew exactly what was in it. No hidden chemicals, no artificial dyes, no harsh preservatives, just clean, simple ingredients. This is not a sponsored video. I bought all the ingredients with my own money. And honestly, I wish I had done this years ago. Let me give you some context about why most commercial dish soaps are full of unnecessary chemicals. The main ingredient in most liquid dish soaps is water, often more than 70%. The second ingredient is a surfactant, usually a synthetic chemical like sodium lauryl sulfate, which creates bubbles and lifts grease. Then they add artificial dyes to make it look appealing, strong fragrances to mask the chemical smell, and preservatives to extend shelf life. None of these ingredients are necessary for cleaning. Homemade dish soap relies on the natural cleaning power of castile soap, a saponified oil, usually olive or coconut oil, and washing soda, which softens water and boosts grease-cutting ability. The ingredients are safe, biodegradable, and do exactly what they're supposed to do without any extras. I used a 1/4 cup of liquid castile soap, 1 tablespoon of washing soap, and about 20 drops of lemon essential oil. I mixed them in a clean bottle and added 2 cups of water. I shook it well, and it was ready to use. The texture was thinner than store-bought, but it lathered surprisingly well. I tested it on a grease-covered frying pan. I added a small amount to a sponge, scrubbed the pan, and rinsed it. The grease came off easily, and the pan was sparkling clean. I tested it on a burnt pot by adding a bit of baking soda and letting it soak. The burnt residue lifted off effortlessly. I compared the foam levels of the homemade soap and a leading brand. The leading brand had a thick, creamy foam that lasted for about a minute. The homemade soap had a lighter, quicker foam that faded faster, but both cleaned equally well. I also tested the pH level. The commercial brand was around pH 7 neutral, and the homemade version was around pH 8, slightly alkaline. The slight alkalinity helps cut grease, but it's still gentle on hands. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to test the homemade soap on a variety of surfaces and stains. I tested it on a greasy baking sheet, a stained glass casserole dish, and a plastic container that had been used for oily food. On the baking sheet, the homemade soap cut through the baked-on grease with a little scrubbing. On the glass dish, it removed the food stains without leaving any streaks. On the plastic container, it cleaned off the oily residue, but it took a little more effort than the commercial brand. I also tested the soap in hard water. I live in an area with hard water, and I wanted to see if the washing soda would help soften the water and boost cleaning. It worked well. The soap lathered and cleaned effectively even in hard water. I also tested the soap in cold water. It cleaned well, but the lather was noticeably less. So if you use cold water for washing, you might need to use a bit more soap or warm the water slightly. I also experimented with different essential oils. I tried lavender, tea tree, and orange. Lavender gave a calming scent, tea tree added antibacterial properties, and orange was great for cutting grease. I found that citrus oils work best for grease-heavy dishes. I also tried a variation without any essential oil. It still cleaned well, but it didn't have the pleasant smell that I enjoyed. So essential oils are optional but recommended for a better experience. I also compared the cost over time. The store-bought soap costs about $6 for a 24-ounce bottle, and it lasts about 3 weeks with daily use. The homemade soap costs about $2 per batch, and each batch makes about 32 ounces. That means the homemade soap is about 3 times cheaper per ounce. Over a year, I would save about $24. Over 5 years, that's $120. Not a huge amount, but for 5 minutes of work, it's a good return. Now, let me give you the final numbers. The commercial dish soap costs about $6 per bottle and lasts about 3 weeks. The homemade batch costs about $2 and lasts about 3 months. That means I saved about $12 over 6 months and about $24 per year. Over a decade, that's nearly $240. Not bad for a 5-minute recipe, but there are limitations. The homemade soap is thinner and less foamy than store-bought. Some people prefer the thick, creamy texture of commercial soap. Also, you need to store it in a glass or plastic bottle and shake it before each use because the ingredients can separate over time. You also need to use distilled or filtered water to prevent bacteria growth. Regular tap water can introduce impurities that shorten the shelf life. I also learned that the choice of soap matters. Liquid castile soap works best, but you can also use grated bar soap if you dissolve it in water. The grating method takes a bit more work, but it's just as effective. For the essential oils, I found that lemon and orange oils are great for cutting grease, while tea tree oil adds antibacterial properties. You can customize the scent to your preference. I also tested the soap on a delicate ceramic dish. It didn't scratch or damage the glaze. It's safe for most surfaces, and I found that adding a tablespoon of white vinegar to the rinse water helps remove any residue and leaves dishes sparkling. That's a trick I learned from my grandmother. Does this homemade dishwashing liquid actually work? Yes, it works. It cleans dishes effectively, cuts through grease, and leaves dishes sparkling. Is it as good as the commercial brand? It's a different experience. Less foam, thinner texture, but equal cleaning power. Should you try it? If you want to save money, reduce chemicals in your home, and enjoy a simple DIY project, absolutely. Just be prepared for a thinner texture and a gentler foam. And always shake before use. The most important thing I learned is that we don't need to rely on big brands to clean our homes. With a few simple ingredients and 5 minutes of time, you can make a product that works just as well, and you'll save money in the process. That's a win all around. If you enjoyed this experiment and you want to see more real tests like this, you need to commit to this channel right now. Subscribe to Overlooked and hit that notification bell because I test the hacks that nobody else dares to try, and I show you the truth, whether it works or fails. Trust me, you will not want to miss the next experiment. If you have ever made your own dish soap, or if you have any other cleaning hacks, let me know in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your experiences, good or bad. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the best cleaning product isn't in a fancy bottle, It's in your kitchen cabinet, waiting to be mixed. You just have to be willing to try. See you in the next one.